Hello and welcome to Live from the Actuality. I'm Darcy and I'm here with Sean and Bruce, and we all just got to see a super cool couple of development mode scenes as
Hello and
our
welcome to
secrets
Live from
behind
the
these scenes
Actuality.
start to ramp up.
I'm Darcy.
It's been super fun for us, for those of you who don't know, to watch this because we haven't seen each other's development mode scenes a lot of times until we get here. So a lot of us are experiencing this for the first time. Um, so thank you for joining us. And please, we'll be looking in chat if you have any questions. And please feel free to retweet those tweets and let people know we're here live at your disposal. So, how are you guys doing, Sean and Bruce?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Good to hear it. So the last two sessions are kind of what we're digging into today, I think. So that the side scenes and then the 3-2 and 3-1, and they were kind of doozies. So 3-1 was wards, pacts, and casual trespassing, which is our kind of like Ocean's 11 style. I would say, episode where we plan the heist and we team up with other ne'er do wells, where morals get a little bit slippery, and so on. And then the last episode was the Ever Dying God, which was just wrecked me. I like even watching my face during the video again last week was like really painful. It was like painful to go through all over again. I was getting ooh, are people getting vid and voice? Hopefully, let us know if there are tech issues. We'll try to watch it for you. Um, yeah, if you two can boost your, maybe I can boost it. We'll find out. Nope. We'll try to have them
My
speak
mic's
up.
pretty high.
uh,
I can speak up, it's fine. Yeah.
cool. We'll all project because we're all ex theater kids, right? To some degree, or at least I am. Um,
Debate. We're
Debate. There we
trying.
go. Excellent. So, lots to talk about, but please, bring us your questions if you have anything specific. With respect to the side scene, one thing I just wanted to bring up was that we just got a teaser that next week's session will have a ghost girlfriend returning. So get excited for that. But even in this side scene, Thanataris is a really cool NPC, and I like have a big major fictional crush on her. And so I think Monty told me afterwards that he was like, not, Invisible Sun is a game where it really welcomes kind of more adult themes and sort of relationships and sort of meaningful playing out of romance. So there was almost a will they, won't they going on in side scenes, which I super adored. Uh, what about you, Sean? What are you really excited to talk about today, or anything like that?
Well, again, it's like Sarah was just so chill about things, and that was such an emotional episode. Like I like the part where we turn and walk away, and Sarah stops and says, "I wish I could do more for you," even though Amarius is like, "Do not speak to her; you'll be destroyed." That just went completely out of my head. I'm like, "I'm sorry. I wish I could." I was literally like, tears were about to come out of my eyes, and that happened. It's so intense for us to work on all those sessions together. It's great. It's a really cool experience for us.
Oh, absolutely. Oof. How about you, Bruce? What are you thinking?
Oh well, I'm thinking back to that particular moment when Saru was reaching back towards this dying goddess, and I'm, as a player who's just like totally, I can go both ways. I can be like, I want to get the thing done. I want to do what's happening, right, and I want us all to live. And so from that perspective, the Bruce part of me was going, why are you doing this, right? What the heck? But from the point of view of like, I can imagine us being in that particular scene where there's this 15 and the overpowering sensation that would feel. And I appreciate now, having just rewatched it today, what Saru actually did. So in my head, I was like, oh, okay, Sevian, and I imagine Sevian Clay, he had got some information about his father, right? He's like, okay, we got, I've forgotten something, and it makes me upset and I'm worried about, but in his head, he was probably angry as well. But I can imagine now he and I have kind of come to an agreement that I can see why Saru was so overwhelmed in that particular scene.
What is Sevian's heart?
Sevian's heart is not right next to me right now, so I can't actually tell you that. No, it's put away someplace. Guess I should have had it out now that you asked me this question.
Oh,
I think everybody in our group has different hearts.
You are an ardent. I have it down below. If you scroll down, everyone watching on Twitch, I have little bios of the characters. I totally forgot my full character sentence too. It's been a while. So you're an ardent.
Well, I was ardently trying to get out of there at that particular scene with the giant psychic snail trying to blast us. Oh, right. I had lost all my sorcery, remember? I was like, I put all my energy into the thing. We're going to get rid of this thing. And suddenly I was like, oh, well, that was a big
And then it reflected its magic on us.
So
that was so tense.
Going into that scene a little discombobulated.
I realized as I was rewatching it live last week, we walked into that with your angel. And we just totally forgot it because we were just so overwhelmed by Amarius and the goddess and the girl from the other show. We're like, we have this angel, but what?
About the scene in the Angelicas' throne chamber.
Hang on, sorry, just making sure that we're on the right. There's some scene changing in OBS, so sorry everybody. So what was I thinking during
the heist? We were talking Angelicas, the second episode.
Yeah, that was so intense. So you know, there's this big snail guardian, and of course I have spent large part of my adult life studying snails, and they have plagued me in very deep ways, right? And so the idea of like going up against this horrible, terrifying snail guardian was like cathartic on some different levels, but also, I mean, not even really cathartic, right? It was that we couldn't really defeat it. It really was above our pay grade, right? Like we did not defeat anything, right? We like squeaked by, and Saru came back very changed. So that was a super scary encounter. I'm so glad that Saru did approach the Everdying Goddess though, because I mean I was so curious. Like that whole, as soon as we heard about her, I was like, I want to know everything about her. I want to know her deal. I want to like understand what happened to her in the war, before the war, like what she was. I want to know everything there is to know about her. And of course, we didn't get to go that far. It was like it was cool to be up against like such a deep mystery, but also really frustrating.
Yeah, the fact that she had armor that was made of interwoven roots and plants and leaves made you realize she probably has this huge, crazy backstory where she was some sort of god of growth and health and who knows what, and for her to come to this low, I mean, I'm imagining, right? We never found out. So
oh man, so frustrating and so good. And then the girl from the other shore is like a whole separate, what even was that? I love the mechanic, or like I love the GM move. Like it's been fun to watch, to get to play in a game like that with Monty, right? Like I'm just a newer GM, so like there's so much I can learn when I get to like play games with people who are really experienced. And so I love those moments where the players get to contribute something, so like where they get asked to contribute something from their character's backstory, because like you're always going to reveal something really, really personal to you, right? So you get that investment. And so having us bring up like a really precious memory and then lose it was just knife twisty in all the ways that I love and hated. I left feeling like empty from that session. Like we had to, I mean, I came back in like pajamas, right? I had to like go do some like self-care before these side scenes because I was so distraught.
I know. I think each one of us, what's this most precious memory, right? So we each kind of had to dig down inside our own heads and come up with something. And I was wearing the red glasses, and after I was saying, well, the one time my father was kind to me, right? I was, of course, thinking my own father in real life, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, had tears coming down my eyes, and I was like, oh, okay, let's try and play this off, but
Jeez.
it was a little tough actually. That's those kind of those kind of experiences are rare in
Yeah.
RPGs, but seemingly more common because of the player arcs that are the character arcs that happen in Invisible Sun, which kind of help lead you down into these things. So they're nice tools, and but also a little hard sometimes in a good way to experience.
And we're also invested in those characters. We spend a lot of time even beforehand working on, putting the mental energy into it. And like Monty asked us that question, we weren't given that question ahead of time. That was just like, oh, we're on the spot to come up with some really important memory, and we all just nailed it. Something really, really cool
Yeah.
and personal for our characters. So it's really sweet. I also like Darcy mentioned how just bringing up stuff from the characters is a very strong thing in Invisible Sun. This narrative could have gone in many different ways in future episodes, depending on what we chose to look for. I mean, we had our main arcs that Bruce is trying to capture his father, and I want to make the sword and stuff. But the exact details of that path are really variable. Monty's really good at improvising and picking up threads and kind of tying them together in new ways that fit that path. But he's also really cool at, if we make a choice like that we just did, it can be a significant point later in the narrative. For example, Seru being so connected to the ever-dying god and having an awareness of all that anguish actually comes to our advantage in an upcoming episode. But I'm not going to spoil about it, but there's a creature where we have to show something, and I'm like, well, how about this? And it worked out very well for us.
Yeah, Monty is. I mean, now we're going off that scene, but he's very good at the sort of technique called yes and, right? Not saying no and closing off, but saying a qualified yes, which means okay, but here are repercussions of that, right? So he maintains sort of a narrative control, as a good GM should try and do. I advocate for that sort of yes and sort of GMing style, and it works out really well.
I think it's also really neat because Invisible Sun acknowledges that you need joy and despair for your character to advance. And so it's okay if good stuff happens, and it's okay if bad stuff happens to your character, because you need both. And I believe in the books, he points out that players tend to build their characters and their character arcs in such a way that they tend to get rewarded with joy because they want to have successes for themselves. But the GM shift mechanic can be used to introduce a change that is either a positive change or a negative change, and encourages them, the GM, to use despair as a reward for that, because the players aren't necessarily going to build that into themselves, and they need it to advance their character.
Yeah. But even still, sometimes I have players who all they want is to see their character suffer. They just dig that knife deeper. They really want the torture side, and I like that the joy mechanic forces them to say, okay, it forces kind of a dimensionality to your character, right? It says, okay, but what would my character, is it realistic that a fully dimensional human or being would only really have terrible things to happen to them? Like, it makes them feel more real to force the people who want to suffer to find some little bits of things they can take joy away from, which is really fascinating. Yeah, and I guess one thing I wanted to say is how, since I've been jamming Invisible Sun to the best of my ability, which is very different, over at A Woman with Hollow Eyes, I've been impressed at how those character arcs and how kind of putting so much on the players, or letting players take so much of what do you want today? Even these side scenes, right? It lets the player pitch to the GM a lot of times what they want to do. It means I feel like, since I don't have to come to the table with as much of an adventure proper, I've already sort of lifted my mind of that burden, and I just get to think of cool stuff that I weave together. And so I don't know that I'd necessarily be as good of a GM about weaving all of these different character arcs together and letting those choices really matter, but the way that game is built makes it easy for you to do that. The mechanics of the character arcs and the asking players to come to you, it works better than it has any right to, is how I feel. It's probably just good design, but it's surprising how well it's worked.
Agreed. should we talk about the earlier session, the heist session? Was there anything of interest that kind of that came out of that? I just rewatched it today, so
Cool.
I remember I remember just being so going into it thinking, oh no, we're not going to steal anything from this vault in the Kensingtons, I believe it was called, and uh, and then by the end, when there was a book, well, yes, sure, the cicatrix was just like, and I just put that knife back and I take those coins. That was fantastic. But Sevian was very tempted when he heard, at least Bruce heard, that there was this demon book, right? And this whole time was like, I'm going to take this book. I'm going to take this book. But then in Kalia, Shauna's character never told me. She just took it herself, right? Speaking of the rivalry between, that's a character arc that Kalia and Sevian share. And so her to actually just secretly do that, she got one up on Sevian. Sevian never even knew it. Maybe he finds out later. But in that particular scene, I really appreciated how that played out. Bruce appreciated it.
Yeah. Gosh, I was going to say that's like one of my favorite things to come away from that was in Kalia, you know, unbeknownst to our characters, but our player knowledge that in Kalia, who had been so adamant that we don't steal anything, that we're just doing this because we're really morally motivated to do it, and if there's any other way, we'd never break the rules, blah, blah, blah. And then it's her who does like the most treacherous thing that anyone, I feel like even Kendon didn't betray us. Like, it was Ikalia who did it.
That's a good point.
Oh gosh, so that was really cool, and I think there are a lot of moments like that where, we sort of have a lot of time to live in these characters, but see them change. And yeah, gosh, I loved that moment with Inkalia. But then I think my one of my other favorite moments was GIF-ified, and I think we have a Twitch clip on it on our Twitch site. But it's when I've helped like sort of disable the security system of Kensington's a little bit, and of course I'm going to all this trouble, and really I just need to like touch this little like disc or whatever, but I'm really prepared for this to be very hard and intense, and so the wards drop and it's fine. But Saru had said like maybe there's something to this order of honed thought, and I like Darcy the person like lost it a little bit because I just I thought I was really pushing on it, but like for my character to have a moment where it felt like she was finally getting a little movement or a little like respect from you, or at least interest. I think since that was one of my character arcs, I think, or is it just our bond? I
It's our
forget.
bond.
Yeah,
Your arc is for the order, so it kind of ties together.
right. So that
And
was.
she
Oh,
and then Bruce right before that, Sevian had said like, the cicatrix really knows her stuff, and so he basically just set me up for this perfect like little one-liner. And again, it's just an example of we know each other well enough, and these character styles just mesh so perfectly that we can just have a really good rivalry between Inkalia and Sevian, and we can have this weird sort of like, please join my order relationship between the Cicatrix and Stero. It's just, it works so well, and it's so fun.
it really was. I'm excited for people to see. We're only on session 3. We've only finished session 3 out of 7, so there's a lot. There's a lot that's going to happen, which is really exciting. But we have a few questions, so maybe we could toss to some of those, and we can come back around if we have more stuff. This is already like processing therapy for me, which I appreciate because the last episode was just a doozy. Um, Cool. So, some folks like Dosh of Dhaka are asking about how far the app is coming along, and so I don't think we have a super official answer, but it is coming along, and I think we'll be playtesting it a bit internally before too long. So I would suspect if you listen around, you'll hear some details about that, which I'm very excited by because I have a Slack for a woman with hollow eyes, and so we've been doing development modes there. But a lot of times I'm like traveling or something, and so I don't have my suit back on me, and they're in Slack and they're like, "Okay, I'm ready to do more of this text-based development mode," and I'm like, "I really need a card, and I don't have one." So I've like. There are ways I could have gotten around it, but I'm really, really like I've already in my life had that space where I'm excited to have that app to pull up the card.
And I'm in a similar boat
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm running an in-house Invisible Sun game, but it's all online. All my other players are all remote, and so whenever I have to draw a Sooth card, I have to talk to them about it and like put it out on my desk, and they have to keep asking, and I have to remind them of this and that. Just being able to have that in hand and distribute everybody. I'm looking forward to being able to use that in my game too.
Absolutely. We're excited to show it off. Uh, there's another question from Spanglemaker 371 asking about examples of us advancing characters in our fortes. And I'm trying to remember, do either of you remember specific moments where you were, during this season, you advanced in your forte?
I think I probably advanced. It's a matter of how many. Whenever you advance in your forte, we were talking about this before. You have to spend both despair and joy. One despair and one joy comes together and form a crux. And for the first several abilities that you can draw from your forte, it costs one crux. So one of the great things about advancing in a forte is that it's sort of cheap. So you get two or three different abilities from your forte before you have to jump up to the ones that cost two crux. And each time you do, you also get points which you can add to your to one of your pools, right? So I always, of course, add everything to my sorcerer because it's a game about magic. But I don't remember specifically what I did, but I'm sure I just advanced myself to. I think we'll probably see it in the side scene actually going forward. But we will actually have us. I'll learn more about summoning demons. Sorry, there's probably some background noise.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, and especially, your forte was felt like so much, at least as an outsider, felt so much a part of your character.
I just made a mistake because of the background noise. It was distracting me. I cage adversaries, right? That was
Yeah.
my forte, not my ability to summon angels. Angels and devils comes, of course, from my goetic ability.
Right. Yeah, and so that, like, leveling up your cage to get ready to cage your father was, I think, a big part of it. So I think you'll be seeing that in some side scenes probably. Um,
Sari, did you remember anything specifically with your forte? You said.
Yes, so Aceros is splinters into fragments. He's got this whole glass theme going, and the base ability that he has is very subtle in that if he's hit, he kind of just fragments into broken glass and then just reassembles together. And the game effect is that it basically just gives him a level in dodging. So it's not super obvious and flashy, but partway through, I think after session 4 or 5, I built the one that lets me break myself into like 9 tiny little versions of myself. Sorry, loud car passing.
That wasn't me.
No, that was Bruce again. But I can break myself into a bunch of tiny little versions of myself and run around, kind of like from Evil Dead 2, or all the little miniature, or sorry, Army of Darkness, or all the little miniature versions of me are running around and doing stuff, and then I can just assemble back together again.
the abilities in this game are ridiculous. Yeah, we have a bunch of good questions, so I'm going to try to bounce around. There is one about let us see. Da, da, da. Like the biggest from Davidson 925. What's the biggest hint you can give on how to get into the right mindset for this game? I think that's kind of a big, cool question. There's lots of ways to answer it, probably. One thing, I had a friend, John Harness, guest on A Woman with Hollow Eyes, and so he sort of made a character and sort of did all of the very quickly did all of the making a character, going on the show and playing it. And so one thing he did to help him get in the mindset was to make a Pinterest board. He had a lot of, he's like a big art guy, and so he went into like looked at a bunch of like classic surrealist art to get into that mood. Either of you have any ideas for how you kind of would get into get into character, get into the mood?
Well, I mean, doing the session zero yourself, right? Setting your character up is a great thing to do because you're reading through all this stuff, and honestly, it's all written in voice, right? This is a game which goes a lot farther than most of the games that I've ever played, speaking in voice in a very effective way,
Mm.
in all the different various voices that are actually. It's not just one in voice. There are various different voices. So just like reading it to create your character, it puts you in the mindset. Going reading some of the fiction that's associated with each little section. But then the very first session where everyone sits down to play together, it's basically everyone getting to know each other's characters because you help the other characters come up with things about them, right? And by helping them come up with stuff about their characters and them helping you come up with stuff about your characters, you're all working together. I mean, it's part of the mechanics of the game, designed specifically to help you get into that mood for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And anything from you, Sean, about that, or?
Well, Monty has a Pinterest board that was originally called Invisible Sun Fashion. It might just be called Invisible Sun now, but there's like 1,000 pieces of art from all over that he's found. That's really good, inspirational stuff to look at.
Cool. Yeah, there's some more questions about the suit deck specifics, which unfortunately I can't answer yet, but hopefully we'll have some news for you on that suit pretty soon. Davidson925 was asking about do Goetics only summon angels and devils, or can they summon other things like fae or other things? Uh,
I think that works. You can summon other types of things. Angels and devils are the easiest to summon, but there are other types of spiritual entities and thought forms that you could try and summon. Um, Maybe there'll
And
be more
ghosts.
on that. Oh, and ghosts. Yeah, all right. I think. Well, yeah. Maybe I do try and summon something different later on. We'll see.
Excellent secrets in this game. There's lots of them. Uh, from let's see, Dizarasta asks says that magic is, really quantified in Invisible Sun. There's lots of ways to interact with it. Have we found any balancing niggles? And you know, I didn't decide this or anything like that, but I guess asking about balance in terms of magic and Invisible Sun is really wild because the magic system, there's so many ways to engage with magic, and it's really opt in, which is one thing I like about it, right? Like, depending on the kind of player you are, you can, there's of course like Weaver, Goetic, Maker, and
Vance.
Vance. And then Apostate, if you don't want to deal with any of those four different kinds of, fully fledged magic. And then there's this enormous, like hundreds and hundreds of cards of general spells, which is what all I used. I was an apostate, so I was just getting tons of new weird and really different kinds of spells through the general spells. And then there's secrets, right? Like secrets, which aren't spells, but are basically magic letting you do different things, like see through illusions, or, so that's a whole nother way you can advance your character. And, you could engage with, you know, a lot of these subsystems, or you could just focus on what makes you happiest. And so, yeah, I think like it's really all about customization. And one thing I will say about balance is and maybe Sean can talk about this, there's the spell effects by level table, which is my savior in this game when you're trying to figure out, like, okay, the Weaver has this wacky spell idea. What does that even mean? How does one even possibly put a level to it? Sean, so every time you came up with a Weaver spell, like, could you talk to us about that process?
Yeah, the short form is Monty has all of these different kind of categories of effects ranked out by what approximate spell level they are. And so if hey, I want to do 3 points of damage, you look it up on the table. That's about a third level spell. If you want to teleport one person about 100 feet, that's a fourth or fifth level spell. And so it's very flexible. It's very well quantified. And if you're playing a Weaver, you're just basically living with that chart because you don't have any predefined spells. You're just making up everything on the fly. I wanted
I
to
was.
talk about.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. I interrupted.
Oh, well, I was just going to throw in that Invisible Sun is also like the cipher system in that you might end up with a really powerful cipher or a really weak cipher. Invisible Sun's the same way with ephemeral objects and incantations. Like one of the things in our home game, our characters had to travel to another city, but it's in Indigo. And we could have taken a boat, but I just happened to get an incantation that turns a book into a boat. And so I cast this, and we all just hopped on this book boat and sailed overnight to get to this city. But it's a higher level spell. And so you don't necessarily, you can't just say, pick that spell again because it's above the level that you can normally like hope for. There are spells you can get randomly, and then there are ones you can kind of basically meditate to try and get again. But the limitation is if it's above the highest level spell that you can't try for that spell. So sometimes it gives you a goal of, okay, I know we want to get that level 6 incantation again. I'm going to learn a level 6 spell so that I can choose that incantation again. So there's all these checks and balances built in. It's really, really nicely done.
I'll just follow up on that and say every one of these different orders has its own system, right? We're talking about weavers, which just do things on the fly, and we're talking about vances, which have their own sort of specific way of memorizing spells within this space that we set aside on the character sheet. And of course, the Goetics have all these different abilities summoning. But the underlying thing is that it's all sort of a level. It's not the level based thing of the cipher system, but it's in that spirit, right? And you can grade every single effect on this level of a thing. So it's kind of the underpinning thing that you can control the power, even though these crazy things going on in the narrative, and you're creating a boat out of a book, or you're turning your blood into fire, or whatever. Right, the levels of the effect that the Weaver uses actually underlie all the effects for anything you're trying to do. If you're a maker making stuff,
Yeah.
um, if you're an apostate learning spells. I also played an apostate in our
Oh, cool.
home game, and yeah, just grabbing spells left and right. They don't have to worry about, don't have to weave. I'm just going, oh, that's an interesting spell. I'm gonna
Yeah.
grab that. Depends on what you're interested for that particular character.
Oh man, it's super funny to see character like players learning what they really love, right? Because you know, I in my A Woman with Hollow Eyes game, we had one character who's been a maker, but he's gone through some stuff and has had sort of a crisis of faith and a crisis of everything, and so he's actually leaving the makers, and he's become an apostate. And part of that is that he liked he was curious about the crafting system, but then I think he was getting tempted by all these general cards and about doing things a little differently, and he loved character secrets, and so it was clear he wanted to advance in different ways. And so I don't know, it's just funny how when we were first picking characters, some players would look at an order and be like, why would you ever want to do that? And the other one was like, it's their favorite one. So I love how it really supports all these different kinds of play styles. And even if you had a table full of advances with the general spells, or they could not advance in their order, right? You could stay first tier in your order forever and just focus on your forte and your just picking up general spells. So
Or
there's
even advancing your house. Like some, you might just want to invest everything in your house. You could be this sort of homebody and put all this magic into your secrets for your house. And there's a secret that'll animate your house as a creature, like a little humanoid creature, and it'll follow you around and do stuff. And so you would have an incentive to say, hey, I'm going to spend a bunch of acumen to get my house up to level 6. So now when we go out and do stuff, I have a level 6 entity that is my house hanging around with me. And it's my house, so my house loves me. And they're going to defend me.
Oh man,
It sounds very surreal.
you don't say.
Weird how that is.
Yes, cool. There was two more questions that I'm going to try to combine into one, and it was asking about. Let's see. It was asking about like how our cast of characters tended to be the kind of thinky, schemy type, which is fairly true. You know, we're not. We were occasionally brash, but we weren't bowling people over with it. And so they were sort of asking like, could you get more how the system would work with like aggressive or more action oriented players and characters. And then sort of related to that, so that's from Dash of Dhaka, and Davidson 925 asked if PvP is possible, and how that checks out. So
So the first part I can answer. My character in a different game that we're playing, not for the camera. I play a character called Riven, who's an apostate because he was kicked out of the Goetics, actually,
nice.
because he summoned this horrible demon that killed his mentor, and is all terrible.
Maybe not
But
so
anyway,
nice.
so yeah, so he's all about, a lot of what he does is about combat, right? So he's got this spell which he just goes back to over and over called Stone Pistol. He'll pick up a rock and creates this weapon, Stone Pistol, and it's a level 4 spell. And then he has all these secrets that help him become a better warrior, right? So he's automatically doing 2 extra points with that. He's aiming better, right? So whenever I pull out that Stone Pistol, I'm the combat character. I have spells, but I do enjoy getting into like the actual physical action on the side of the game.
I think maker characters are going to tend to fall towards that role because they're going to craft magical weapons and defensive items, and they're just going to get physical with things. Whereas other character types or their orders might be more cerebral, or more like my character in our home game. He's advanced, but he's very much a support character. He has like a couple of attack spells, but he never uses them because he's always like, he has a spell that says you're out of sorcery. Here, I'm going to just give you a bunch of sorcery, and I've especially because one of our other players is playing a weaver, and so she just has all this versatility. And a lot of times, it's just like you're the one who can teleport all of us where we need to go, or teleport us back home when we're in trouble. But you only have enough energy to do two people. Well, here I'm just
Wow.
going to throw all of my sorcery at you. So suddenly you have 24 sorcery instead of 12, and she's like glowing and
And
lightning in her
she's
eyes. And
getting
you're like,
addicted to your magic. You're the
Oh
pusher.
God.
yeah. So just there's a lot of variety in what you can do, and so people who are just used to like a D&D wizard throwing fireballs and stuff, you can be that, but you can also be the sort of paladin character who's got all the accoutrement and ready to just go and hack at somebody with a magical sword, kind of like what Sarah hopes to do someday.
Yeah, and my impression of the sort of PvP question is both that, like, when it comes to combat at least, or you know maybe even not combat, right? Because you have wounds and then you have anguish, and so we sort of separate out like grievous like damage you've taken that's physical versus mental, cerebral, spiritual, who knows what. And but they're treated equally grave, right? Three wounds will kill you. Three anguish will kill
Anguish.
you. So but how you represent NPCs that way is also with this little box system of they have a certain number of injuries they can take, a certain number of wounds, a certain number of anguish, and then and then there's sort of like a system of kinds of defenses you can have, you can be better at. And so I actually think it wouldn't be hard at all to represent PvP. I'm
Yeah,
trying
it's
to think if
certainly
there's
not built for PvP, right? It's not. It doesn't have that in mind. Same with Cipher System, but it certainly things happen from time to time, and if someone were to attack someone else, right? Usually, someone's not in their right mind, and it's up to the GM
right.
to decide who's making the attack or who's making the defense roll. But otherwise, we work the same way.
Yeah. And I was initially thinking when we talked about cerebral characters versus action oriented characters that, um, there is a bit of an expectation that Vizsla, the kind of people you are like, they love libraries and they want to go to, coffee shops and talk about stuff. And so there's an expectation that Vizsla as a whole are pretty cerebral. But, and time passes, right? Because your studious people need to like have weeks to like learn a new spell, and so in that way the overall pace of the game can accordion out a bit more than other more like let's go fight some gnolls games could go. But I still think what your action oriented character does during that time can be action oriented things. They don't have to be in libraries, right? They could be I'm going to be I'm going to spend some acumen to advance to get some skill in like my sword fighting by going down to like the fighting ring, right? You can so I think it's pretty flexible in that way.
Yeah. And there's at least one fighting ring in Saturn. That so if you are interested in that, maybe your development mode is, hey, I'm just going to go spend a week doing fights and earn some money
Yeah.
and maybe make a reputation for myself.
Cool. I think we've gotten to most of the questions. If not, I'm just gonna put the little command of their contact us form if there's anything. Sorry, hang on. Give anything you're excited about for next week. Do you know what's
Well,
happening? Do you know what's coming?
I know that Sevian. I don't know what's happening specifically next week, but obviously Sevian has got this information about how to actually break through the wards that protects his father in this horrific fashion. So he's very excited about moving forward and finding where he is and getting his revenge.
Excellent. How about you, Sean? I almost called you Saru.
I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I know what's generally coming up next, but not the specifics of next episode. So uh, Bear puts together the episode for us a little bit ahead of time so we can prepare. And I'm looking forward to probably Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, reviewing this next episode just to get psyched about specific things and to get all my screenshots ready for my Twitter feed.
So cool. Awesome. I'm going to give you a few other ways you can reach us and come see all the other strange things we're doing on the interwebs coming up this week. So I have decided tomorrow, Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to do a little like prep for my upcoming Echoes Linger Numenera game. And
Oh,
so I'm going to, none of you can come, none of you can watch
okay.
because you're going to be in
Okay.
it. So stay away. But I'm going to like, we're going to have an encounter in a sort of a session in Bodrov, which is in Navarine, and there's little information about that area in the core book, but I want to flesh it out and find some cool locations and problems and people, and so I love collaborative world building, and so you're all welcome to come up with some cool ideas with me that you might get to see, except for Bruce and Sean. Get out. To come help me come up with some ideas. So I'll put up the event after this show, but it's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Central. Prep party for Echoes Linger. So put your Numenera thinking caps on. And then on Sunday, I'm going to be hosting an RPG brunch chat, which I'm really excited about. So at 10 a.m. Pacific, grab some orange juice and some snacks and some cinnamon rolls and get
I
in
love
chat.
that.
You can come to this, Bruce. Uh, so we're gonna just chat about topics in RPGs, and so the loose conversation topic is going to be new GMs. So whether you are a new GM, whether you know some new GMs, or want to impart some great advice to people who might want advice, we're just going to kind of talk about that and have a freewheeling discussion. So that'll be happening on Twitch on Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific, and then on Tuesday I will be actually jamming the Echoes Linger game at 5 p.m. Pacific. So Echoes Linger episode 2. So yeah, I get excited for that. And it's always fun to watch, Monty and Shauna and Sean and Bruce as players. So we'll see how they handle whatever schemes I come up with mostly tomorrow. Oh,
On
and
Tuesday, I will
yeah.
actually be doing something as well, although on a different channel. I'm going to be on Acquisitions Intoxicated. So hopefully I will be less intoxicated in the evening, but that's going to be around noon Pacific time, probably on the Penny Arcade Twitch channel.
Perfect. We're very excited for that. All right. I think that's all we have for you, but hopefully we'll see you all next Friday. We're, of course, always live in chat, but we'll be reacting along to the next episode with you. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a great night, and be sure to, I hope none of you escape and fall back into shadow. So stay in the actuality, my friends. Bye
Thank you, everybody.
bye.